before you can even think about boarding that Carnival cruise, you're gonna have to check in. Today, we're gonna go step by step to complete the online portion to ensure a smooth arrival and boarding process. And that starts by going to carnival.com. So we're here at carnival.com where you're gonna check in. Some cruise lines have an app where you can check in on. Carnival is one of those that does not. It's all gonna be through their website. If you logged in through the app and you opened it, it would have you check in there, but it would actually just redirect you to a web page on your phone. So skip all that, go to carnival.com, that's where you're gonna check in. And the first thing you wanna do is log in. Hopefully you've already done this ahead of time and linked your cruise so that way you can access your cruise planner. So we're gonna go ahead and log in right now. And once we're logged in, it should always give you a day counter of how far away you are from your next Carnival cruise. As you can tell, we are 14 days to cruising, which is super exciting, but that also means we're within the check-in time. Carnival's check-in doesn't open until 15 days in advance. Other cruise lines are definitely in further advanced, but this one is 15, so as soon as 15 hits, I recommend get online, check in. In order to get the check-in, let's go ahead and click on the 14-day counter. It is going to bring you to your cruise planner, which hopefully you've accessed this already in advance. You can go ahead and book your drink packages, internet plans, and specialty dining in advance of the 15 days. You can do it as soon as you create the reservation. You can do that stuff way in advance, and hopefully you've already done that and you've gotten that stuff taken care of, and now that you're closer to check-in, you're worrying about just check-in and not planning everything else for the cruise. But if you haven't already, it's going to ask you for your reservation number, your name, and your birth date. Just have those things on hand when you're trying to add a Carnival reservation to your online account. So in order to get the check-in, you're going to want to go up to right here where it's going to be planner. Click that. Once we get here, it's going to give us the countdown of how far away our cruise is, and then right here, click this complete online check-in. So like I said, it won't open until 15 days in advance. I recommend doing it as soon as it opens up. That way you can get a good arrival time, arrive when you want. I'm a little late. I would have preferred to have done it yesterday or maybe even at midnight when it opened up. Let's get started. Just a reminder that you can skip a step at any time if you don't have all the information and then come back later to complete it, but just make sure that you complete everything before your cruise, or else it will make it a lot more difficult to get on board. So you can check in for all the guests in your reservation. So it is me and Jaylyn, so I'm gonna be checking in for both of us on this. So if you have multiple cabins and you're trying to check in for multiple people, you can also add it here, add it your cruise manager, and then you can check in for everybody if you wanted to. But it's just me and Jaylyn, so we're just gonna move on. First thing is gonna be where you live for guest one, which is me. You have the option to make it for all guests, so that way you only have to input one address. So we're gonna just apply the address to both of us here in this case. Then the next thing is going to ask for your phone number, then it's going to ask for your email, and you do have an option to click off of special offers. Then the next thing is going to be an emergency contact. So this is in case if something were to happen to you. Hopefully nothing does happen, but you're gonna want to do someone who's not on the cruise at all. So someone who's at home, a family member, a friend, someone that Carnival can contact if something were to happen. And then same thing, you can apply it to all guests, which we're gonna do here in this case. Then as that is all the information for guest number one. Then it's gonna make you go through the same steps again for guest number two. You do have to just look over everything again. So the next part is going to be travel documents, and we're gonna be talking about what you can and cannot use to board the ship. Valid passport. That is the strongest form of documentation that you can use when cruising. You don't necessarily need a passport on all the cruises. It just depends, and we'll talk about which ones you can and cannot use other options, but passport is the best thing. If you have one, use it. If you're thinking about getting one ahead of your cruise, get one. So the next thing is a naturalization certificate. So if you've gone through the process of becoming a US citizen, then that would be a perfectly acceptable form of documentation. Then birth certificate is going to be for those who were born in the US. You can use that, but you will need a form of ID if you're above the age of 16. Under the age of 16, just a birth certificate will do just fine, as long as it's an official government document, not a copy, and that goes for naturalization certificate and birth certificate. So these are both options for you if you do not have a US passport, or any passport in case if you're coming from another country and sailing out of the US. So I guess let's talk about really quickly on when you can use the alternatives from the passport, because it's not going to be applicable to be every sailing. It's only on closed loop sailings leaving and ending out of the same US port. So if you leave out of Los Angeles and end in Los Angeles, and you're not going to a far foreign port, meaning places that are not Canada, Mexico, or the Caribbean, then that is a closed loop sailing. As long as you are on a closed loop sailing, you will be able to use the naturalization certificate or a birth certificate. If it is an international sailing, leaving out of anywhere else other than the US, or going to a far foreign port, you will need a valid passport. Regardless, it doesn't really matter. So say if you're leaving out of Canada, it has to be a passport, whether it's a US passport or whatever country you are from. Now that I've gotten off my soapbox for that, let's go ahead and continue on. First thing it's going to ask is going to be, what is your country of citizenship and residency? So United States and United States for me. Save and continue. It is going to show us the options that we can use. Oh, one more thing that I completely forgot. This is a big disclaimer to everyone. Real ID is not a valid form of documentation. I get this question all the time. People always ask me, I have a Real ID, can I just use that? The answer is no. Real ID is implemented for us to use on domestic flights, not for international travel. Now, there are some select states, and I'm not really too familiar with which ones are, but if you have a state that does this program, an enhanced driver's license or an EDL will be acceptable as well, and that allows you to travel between Canada and Mexico with that ID or with that driver's license. It's not in every state, and Real ID and enhanced driver's licenses are not the same. If you have a Real ID, the answer is no, you need a birth certificate or you need a passport. If you have an enhanced driver's license, then it works just as strong as a passport. Be sure you know which one you have. We're going to be using a passport. And it's going to be asking for the document number, and it's going to be asking for the date of issuance. I can't say that word, and the date of expiration. So it's going to ask for that stuff. So that way they have what your documents are going to be. I'm going to enter it right now. I don't want you to see that part, so we'll skip to the next one. Now that we've entered all the information for the passports and stuff, we can move on. It's going to be travel plans. So what are your travel plans to getting to the cruise terminal? We are going to be sailing out of Long Beach, so we are going to actually drive to the port since we're only 40 minutes away. The answer is going to be yes. Will we be flying to or from this cruise? The answer is no here, but it would ask for your flight information ahead and after the cruise, so that way they can keep track if anything were to be delayed. And then, of course, they want to know for both you and all the guests in your party, and the answer is going to be the same for me and Jalen. We're both driving there in the same car and going to be parking. Then after, it's going to be the arrival appointment. This is going to be the time that you arrive on embarkation day. Let's continue. Let's see what times are available. Oh gosh. That's really bad. So I did double check. Our departure time is actually 11 p.m. that night. I'm not really sure why it's that case. I've never really seen it so late. Usually Carnival leaves around 4. Just make sure you double check the time that you leave. So either way, you're going to want to adhere to the arrival times as best as you possibly can. 5:30 was a little bit of a shock to me. I was not expecting to see that. That's really unfortunate because that's a good chunk of the day that is going to be gone that we don't get to be on the ship. Anyways, we're going to select the earliest time available because my thought and opinion on this is that you should always try and arrive at the earliest time that you can get on the ship, because you paid for the day regardless if you're actually going to be there or not. You're paying for that day. So my thought is always to be one of the first ones on board and just trying to get there as soon as possible. So 5:30 kind of is a little bit heartbreaking because usually the ship is gone by then, but according to the itinerary, we do leave at 11 p.m. and something is going weirdly with that cruise. So I'm not sure if 5:30 is actually the earliest time of arrival, but it's the time that we're getting. So look out for that vlog because I'm sure I'll have a lot to say on boarding day if we're arriving at 5:30 p.m. So the next thing is going to be onboard expenses. Yes, of course, fun, spending money. Yes, you paid for the cruise, but there are more things that you could possibly buy on board. Essentially, Carnival is just making an all-in-one transaction sort of thing. So you'll have your sail and sign card, which is going to be your cruise card. It'll be like your key and your charge account. So you can just charge it to the card. There's not going to be accepted any cash or any credit cards while on board. So that's why you have to set this up ahead of time. You have two options. You could do a credit card or a debit card, or you can do a cash account. So let me start with the cash account. So the way a cash account works is that you will set aside X amount of money to go on the ship, and you will deposit that money once you get to the terminal. So make sure you bring cash for a cash account. And a lot of people like doing that. It is a good thing. They're just going to hold up that money, and at the end of the cruise, if you don't spend it all, then they will refund that money back to you. I don't necessarily like the idea of Carnival holding on to my money, so I'd recommend doing a credit card and not a debit card, because what's going to happen is if you do a debit card, they will do a hold between $100 and $200 depending on the cruise length. And what's going to happen is if you have a debit card, it's going to freeze money in your bank account. And that's money that is just going to be froze, and additional charges will go on past whatever they decide to hold. But I don't like the idea of Carnival holding on to my money at all. So that's why I would prefer to do a credit card, whereas a credit card, it holds a portion of your credit and then it just gets refunded. It just works differently in my mind. I'd rather have cash in hand and have the credit card be locked up and whatnot. So I recommend doing a credit card and not a debit card for that same reason, and the same thing with cash, is that I just don't want Carnival to hold up actual money of mine. So we're gonna enter all our credit card information and then move on to the next thing. The next thing is gonna be your cruise preferences. It's gonna ask you, do you want 2 twin beds or 1 king bed? So if you're new to cruising, the one thing that's completely different on board is that instead of having 1 bed or 2 beds on board a cruise ship, they actually do this thing where they put 2 twin beds and they either push it together or pull them apart depending on what your preference is. So it's asking us here if we want 2 twin beds or 1 king bed. It's all based upon your preference, and you can put the request in right here. So when you get on board, the bed should be set up the exact way you want. On to the last thing, continue. This is going to be your cruise ticket contract. Just make sure you read it ahead of time so you have an idea of what you're agreeing to. But we're gonna just scroll all the way to the bottom. It is quite a long contract with so many different things to agree to. But honestly, if a lawyer is in there, if they want to read through it and let me know what I'm agreeing to, I would really appreciate it. The next thing it's gonna ask is the use of Smile and Go technology, which is basically a facial recognition thing. It's gonna mainly be used for boarding and debarkation. So when you get there, they're gonna scan a picture of you, so you don't actually have to sign in or do anything. It'll just take a picture, recognize that you are you, and then you can just kind of move on to some same thing when you get off the ship. And now when I talked about earlier about customs, that facial recognition is there as well. The other major thing that it's going to be used for is going to be photos in Pixel Studios. So if you take a picture with a photographer, it'll automatically use facial recognition to distinguish who is in the photo, and it will assign that photo to you. You automatically opt into it when you do online check-in, but as soon as you get on board, go to guest services and opt out of it. That is the only option in case if you don't want to. Just going to ask you one last time, you accept the cruise ticket contract, code of conduct, and guest screening policies. I'm gonna go ahead and continue, yes, or else you won't be able to board. Then you have to accept the use of Smile and Go technology, complete online check-in, and boom! So we have completed online check-in. It was a painless process, right? It did take a little bit. There was a lot of questions, a lot of information to fill out. We have our arrival appointment, we have our boarding passes and a luggage tag, which you are going to want to print out ahead of time so you can arrive at your port and set sail for a fun vacation. Let me know if you have any questions down below about check-in. Make sure to check out our Carnival Miracle series when we actually get there, because we're going to be going on Carnival Miracle. Thank you so much for watching. As always, this isn't a goodbye, but just a see you real soon.